It is Y105, Dubuque's #1 hit music station. My name is Steve Pulaski. My next guest has been a film critic for a couple of decades now, seeing hundreds of movies a year and curating thoughtfully written reviews and more on his website, RealViews. He's one of the critics I read on a weekly basis, old reviews and new, and you can too at RealViews.net. That's REEL Views.net. He's kind enough to join me on the phone this morning. He is James Berardinelli. James, how are you?
Doing well.
Complete this sentence for me, James, if you can. The best movie currently in theaters is blank, and why?
Oh, boy. We're not in a good era right now. I got to tell you, the best movie available right now is actually not in theaters. It just dropped on Netflix last Friday, and it's called Hitman. And this is kind of where we are right now, where there are a lot of movies that, sort of the mid-budget movies mainly, that don't make it to theaters or that only have a brief theatrical engagement and then end up on one streaming service or another. Hitman is an example of that. It's directed by Richard Linklater, who many people will know from anything from School of Rock, the Before trilogy, Boyhood. He's not a small director, although he has preferred independent films. It stars Glenn Powell, who is, you talk about a guy whose star is on the rise right now. Anyone But You. Well, he started getting noticed with Top Gun Maverick, and then there was Anyone But You, and this year he's in Hitman, and he is one of the co-leads for the upcoming summer blockbuster Twisters. So, this is a guy whose star is on the rise. It's a small film. It's kind of a little bit of a comedy, a little bit of a thriller, a little bit of a romance. It's got a lot of stuff going on with it. Really smart script, great chemistry between Powell and his co-star Adria Arjona, and it's just a lot of fun. So it's available now, and it is really the best movie out there, bar none, right now. Now, if you really want to go specifically to stuff that's in theaters, I don't know, maybe I would go with Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. The Fall Guy, which is now really out of theaters, I thought was a lot of fun. And I like Furiosa, but I'm a Mad Max fan. And in order to like Furiosa, you have to be a Mad Max fan. But even Mad Max fans will tell you this is one of the weaker of the, let's see, there have now been 4 Mad Maxes plus this. It's one of the weakest of the 5 installments. So that's a long-winded answer to what I think was a short question.
What is the worst movie currently in theaters or available, and why?
Oh, we have many choices here. This is the flip side. I would say that the thing that jumps out at me as the worst right now is The Watchers.
I agree.
Which is it's from Ishana Knight Shyamalan, M. Night's daughter, and they've been to their credit, they've been very open about the fact that she got this movie because she's his daughter, and unfortunately, it plays like a really bad M. Night film. I mean, it's not well directed, it's not well written, it's not well acted, it's not well anything. It has an intriguing premise, and it makes for a really great trailer. So here's the thing. You can cherry pick scenes and moments and images from the movie and assemble them into a 2 to 3 minute trailer, and it looks like it's a movie. And you will hold that opinion until about 5 or 10 minutes into the movie. At that point, you'll be wondering why you actually bothered to get up off of your comfortable couch and go into a movie theater to watch this. Or if at some point in the future you're watching it on your comfortable couch, you will probably turn it off and go watch something else.
I said if nothing else, Ashana got her happening out of the way early in her career.
Well, yeah. The problem is, now, because she's M. Night's daughter, it won't kill her career. But this is the kind of thing that would, for most filmmakers, it would kill them dead right at the beginning. Another bad movie out there right now is Back to Black, which is I am just absolutely sick of these biopics of musicians just because someone has a lot of talent and can make great records doesn't mean that their story deserves big screen treatment. So we have this is the tale of Amy Winehouse, and okay, maybe. I don't know why they made this movie. Amy Winehouse was a big deal when she was alive, and her death, of course, sent ripples through the. But today she is one of any number of good dead musicians, and I don't know why we're cherry picking her out of this field of so many worthy artists who are out there. Is it because she fought addiction? I don't understand why. I don't really get why, and I don't think anybody else did either, because the movie is, after only having been out for a few weeks, it's already leaving theaters because nobody in particular wants to see it.
I'm glad you mentioned Back to Black, James, because I thought it was a really disrespectful biopic rather, and the reason I say that is because the movie opens with Amy Winehouse saying she wants to be remembered for her music. And then it's like, let's watch this junkie for 2 hours drink and smoke her way to death and sort of retrofit certain sequences in her life that we saw unfold in the public with a completely different spin. I found that movie very disrespectful. I almost think these biopics nowadays, these musical biopics like Bob Marley, One Love, Back to Black, I almost think their first goal is to game the streaming numbers of these artists as opposed to making a good movie.
Yeah, and in this case, at least with the Bob Marley film, which I didn't particularly like either, they sort of focused on his music a little bit. Here, there's nothing about the creative side of her.
Nope.
Yeah, there's one shot of her in the studio, recording something. There's never most biographies of musicians at least focus on the music more than this. I don't understand why it was made and what the motivation was. I mean, Sam Taylor Johnson, who directed it, does not exactly have a sparkling resume. I mean, what is she best known for? Well, she's best known for 50 Shades of Grey, and maybe that says all that needs to be said.
He is James Berardinelli. Love talking movies with you already, my friend, but you were one of the first web-based critics there ever was. You weren't affiliated with a media outlet, a newspaper. You just up and did it for yourself. What was that like at first, creating ReelViews with no real roadmap to how this is done outside the system?
Well, I started writing reviews in 1992, and I was not initially on the internet. I was on a local bulletin board service, and I wrote fairly short reviews, about a paragraph per movie. And I found that I just liked the routine. You go see a movie, you write about it. And this was my second year out of college. So I had a regular 9-to-5 job that I was in electrical engineering. And the electrical engineering curriculum when you're in school is very intensive, or at least it was 30-some-odd years ago. And you have no free time. So you're constantly studying, working problems, and so forth. And then you get out of school, which was basically engineering 24/7. And now all of a sudden you're working just about 40 hours a week. And you've got all this free time. And, what are you going to do in all this free time, especially when you have no social life to speak of? Well, I started going to movies, and I went to a lot of movies. And in 1992, I went to 182 movies or something like that. I wrote a short review of each of them. And, I wanted to find an outlet. It's nice to write, but you want somebody to read it eventually. So I started with this bulletin board service. And this was at a time when the internet was starting to percolate. It was in its infancy at the time. Basically, there was no World Wide Web to speak of in 1992 and 93. The internet consisted of email and Usenet. And so I started posting reviews beginning in early 1993 to the Usenet news group Rec Arts Movies and Rec Arts Movies Reviews. And this, of course, right now this is gibberish to anybody who's under about 50. But these were text-based, essentially bulletin board services that anyone who was attached to the internet could read. So I developed a relatively large following because there weren't that many of us. There were maybe about 5 or 6 or 7 people who would regularly post reviews. So, and the internet community was constantly expanding. So at this point, you could generate quite a bit of a following and interest if you were consistent. I should note that, to my knowledge, of those of us who really kind of got in at that bottom level, there are only 2 of us who are still at it, myself and Mark Leeper. And Mark never kind of went the direction I went in. He continued to post reviews, but he never, for whatever reason, he always kept his following small, his website small. I think he's still going at it now, and he's probably 10 or 15 years older than I am. And but we're the only ones left from that early group. RealViews came about in 1996. And between 93 and 96, that's when the World Wide Web came into vogue. And that's when people started using the internet more widely, primarily at work. Home internet was still something of a novelty in the mid-90s, I would say. But I decided I wanted to have a presence there. So I started the website in early 1996. And over the years, it's obviously changed and evolved. But I've had the same basic philosophy since the beginning in terms of what I want to do with my reviews and how I want to bring my opinions out.
That is RealViews.net. You can check out James Berardinelli's archives, ReelViews.net. Few more questions with you, James. How I found out about you 2 years ago was, I think, in part scouring on IMDb, and you were also somebody who a couple times I remember seeing name dropped in reviews by the late, great Roger Ebert. What was your relationship with Roger like? I remember in 2001, he called you the best of the web-based critics. What was your relationship, if any, like with Roger?
Yeah, I started... I first heard from Roger in early 1997. So RealViews at this point was only about a year old. Now, I actually never asked him if he read me when I was on Usenet. I suspect he did, because he himself was very active on the internet early on. He was I think the only major film critic who wholly embraced the online community, early, and I mean early to mid-90s. He was already a big presence on there, mainly through CompuServe. And so I got an email from him in early 1997. He just basically introduced himself. And I kind of thought it was a prank initially. And today, absolutely, you would think it was a prank. But back then, pranking was not that common over email. So I looked into it a little bit more and found out, no, this was actually him. So I was extremely flattered. And then, he came out. He wrote a column for Yahoo Internet Life, I think it was called. It was at a time when Yahoo was the biggest of the search engines, and they decided they were going to start a magazine. So they hired a lot of well-known writers, including Roger, and he had a monthly column for them. And in one of those columns, he did write something about the web-based critics, and that was the one where he anointed me as the best of the web-based critics. Now, keep in mind, this was late 90s, so I don't know that I would necessarily still qualify, but back in the late 90s, yeah, I definitely qualified. So we then met up at the Toronto Film Festival in September of 1997. And after that, we continued a very cordial friendship. We'd meet a few times a year at film festivals. We'd hang out, go to dinner together. I got him to come out to Philadelphia for the local film festival, and he brought me into Champaign-Urbana for the inaugural Ebert Film Festival, which at that point was called the Overlooked Film Festival, and that would have been in 1999 was the first edition of that. So we maintained a fairly close friendship until he lost his voice and underwent the number of surgeries for cancer. And after that, he was, we still did a lot of email correspondence, but I only encountered him a couple times after the surgeries in Toronto. And then, of course, he died in 2013.
Love those anecdotes right there, James. A couple more quick questions with you, too. Much has been made about films like The Fall Guy and Furiosa, quote-unquote, underperforming at the box office. What do you think is the issue with getting people in movie theaters these days? Is it rectifiable? Are people just too used to watching movies on streaming services, especially compounded by the pandemic a few years ago? What do you think is your solution, or what do you think is really the ultimate problem with trying to get people into theaters?
Well, first of all, the problem with, The Fall Guy underperforming is somebody had unreasonable expectations for how it was going to perform. I think The Fall Guy performed just about as you would expect it to perform. The problem was it was decided within the industry that this was going to be the movie to open the summer season. Well, that was a colossal mistake. Because it's not really a blockbuster. It's a movie that would have done very nicely had it been released in late September or had it been released in April, some other time than the high-pressure point. It did about what you would expect it to do, and it didn't really underperform. The problem was, originally, that position was supposed to be taken by Deadpool versus Wolverine. But that film, because of the strikes, wasn't quite ready, so it got pushed back to July, leaving this gaping hole at the beginning of May. So The Fall Guy slid into it, and, it didn't pop, as they say. Furiosa was never, again, it did about as well as any of the other Mad Max movies in terms of its first weekend. So it's a combination of people thinking things are going to do better than they actually do simply because they're being released at a particular time. Now, it's like Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. The key here is finding something that really resonates with people. It's not that people have abandoned multiplexes. It's that they have abandoned multiplexes except when there's something they really want to see. It's like any other entertainment option. You still have a small core of people that will see lots of things in movie theaters, but you have a much larger and ever-growing core of people who will say, well, is that something I want to go out to see, or can I wait until it streams? And there are a whole lot of movies where they'll answer, I can wait till it streams. But then there are the Barbies and the Super Mario Brothers from last year, which go through the roof, or the Avatar 2 from just a couple of years. Again, these are movies that become destination movies, and everybody still wants to see them. Now, Hollywood is still trying to figure out, what's the alchemy for destination movies. The big destination movies for this summer, I think, are Despicable Me 4, because it's family friendliness, and Deadpool versus Wolverine. Those are going to be traditional blockbusters in the sense that they're going to play in lots of theaters, have huge opening weekends, and make a ton of money over the long haul. What interests me a little bit more are films like Inside Out 2, which is an animated sequel. It's Disney, but I don't think it has quite the same family-friendly quality, or maybe it's just overall marketability as Despicable Me 4. So I'm really interested to see how that will do when it opens next weekend. And another movie that I think will be interesting to watch is Twisters, because it is being well marketed. It does have Glenn Powell. a lot of people like Twister. And although the connection between them is just basically the tornadoes, it's not really a direct sequel in any sense. I think that's a movie it'll be interesting to see how that does. Does it go big or does it fizzle? And that's coming out. The placement of that movie is unfortunate. It's like last year's Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning, which came out the week before Barbie and Oppenheimer. So it only had basically 1 week to itself in theaters, and then it completely got overshadowed and pushed aside.
And then it lost its IMAX theaters, too.
Yeah, and the same thing is happening to Twisters this year, because it gets 1 week, and then Deadpool versus Wolverine opens. Twisters probably need a little bit more love. This would have been a great film to open in May, because I think it would have overshadowed everything else in May. It would have had kind of a free field. I think the industry as a whole, one of the problems with it now is they are mistiming a lot of their releases. And timing now is a big deal when it comes to first weekend grosses and longevity within theaters. And if you mistime something, it might end up turning what could be a really good, profitable film into something that's much more marginal.
He is James Berardinelli. Again, you can check him out at RealViews.net. I want to give you the floor, James. You can promote RealViews.net. You can talk even about your trilogy of books, The Last Whisper of the Gods. Whatever you would like to promote, how can people find you and keep up to date with you? The floor is yours, man.
Well, I've got, RealViews was and has always been my bread and butter. I mean, the website now is... But I used to make a big deal about how old it was, when it was old enough to drive, when it was old enough to drink. Now it's, 27 years old? That sounds about 28 years old, maybe.
It's the same age as me, fun fact.
Yeah, 28 years old. So now it's old enough to be married and have kids. But so that's if you want to, the first place to look for me, it would be RealViews.net. I do a lot of exclusive stuff for my Patreon site. That's where a lot of my writings, my real thoughts. I write 2 or 3 columns a week for that, and they never hit the internet in general. I try to keep the membership fees for that pretty low. You can get most of the content on there for about $5 a month. So that's my pitch for that. As far as the books are concerned, Last Whisper of the Gods was a lot of fun to write. It's a little old now. It was written 7 or 8 years ago, and I am in fact working on something new. And my view of Last Whisper and of the new stuff that I'm writing, I want to go back and write more traditional fantasy. We have a lot of stuff that might have been published more frequently 20 or 30 years ago, with a somewhat more progressive sensibility in general. But that's kind of my philosophy there. I don't try to reinvent the wheel. I try to tell a good story with likable characters or unlikable characters that engages viewers. And I think that Last Whisper was a good first stab at things, but I think I've, in terms of storytelling and just linguistics in general, the new thing that I'm writing right now, which probably won't be available for another couple of years because it is long and I want to have most of it done. It's a multi-book thing. I want to have most of it done so that I can, when the books come out, I can publish them fairly quickly. I don't want to have people hanging like George R.R. Martin.
James, I greatly appreciate your time, man. I hope to talk again soon. Keep at it. Keep up the great work. Again, you're somebody I read on a weekly basis, and I dearly appreciate you making the time today.
Okay, great talking to you.